I know it's super frustrating when you start a new business, but you don't know what entity to choose for your structure. And so today I'm going to talk about two. I'm going to talk about an LLC, which is a limited liability company. And then I'm also going to talk about a sole proprietor. See, you need to know which one is going to give you the best tax benefits. You also need to know which one is going to keep you bogged down with paperwork. And then you also need to know which one is going to be the best protection just in case someone sues you. My name is TK Martin. Let's go ahead and jump into the details. Most people by default become sole proprietors because they haven't selected a business entity or structure. And so one thing about a sole proprietor is that when you do that, when you become a sole proprietor, you take on all debts of the company because there's no separation between you and the company. So you're liable for everything. Also, with the sole proprietorship, if someone sues you, guess what? They're going to take your personal assets because you have no separation between you and the business entity. So sole proprietorship is something that typically people just kind of fall into when they start a business, but I want you to be mindful and I want you to do some research on the other entities and see which one is best for you. Now, of course, we're going to talk about the LLC as well, but I just wanted to give you those details on that sole proprietorship. So be careful with the sole proprietorship. You automatically fall into that category, right? You're operating as a sole proprietorship. If you're a retailer, if you're an online business, if you're selling goods and services, because you haven't selected a entity or structure to separate yourself from being personal liable, right? So you want to make sure that you look into other structures and not just start as a sole proprietor, because you will be responsible for the debts and you will be responsible if somebody sues you, right? They will come after your personal assets. Now let's jump into the LLC and see what the difference is between the two. An LLC stands for Limited Liability Company, and it's a business entity created under state law. And so when it comes to an LLC, one of the things that's really important is that you have so much flexibility as an owner. You're able to create the operational processes, the tax treatment, and the management structure, right? It just gives you more options. Also, when it comes to the LLC, you have protection against creditors. You have protection against people who want to sue you. That's what limited liability corporation means and how it works to protect you as a business owner. So having that structure, you can incorporate just with you yourself as one person, or you can have multiple people as members in that company. See, the LLC structure, it combines corporation, sole proprietorship, and a partnership, right? That's what gives you the flexibility so that you can operate as a individual, but you can also, in that, you're incorporated and you have protection when it comes to creditors and when it comes to people trying to sue you so they won't take your assets. When it comes to your formation with the LLC, the most important thing you need is your articles of incorporation. You can file that with the state. Now, depending on what industry you're in, you're going to need permits and licenses and things like that, but make sure you do your due diligence and your research on it. And then when it comes to the sole proprietorship, typically, like I said, you just kind of fall into that, right? Even if you're doing business, if you're selling, cakes or lotions and potions, you're a solopreneur, you're a sole proprietorship. You automatically fall into that category unless you file for an entity. But that being said, in certain states, you still need permits, you still need licenses. So make sure you do your homework when it comes to your formations. When it comes to the operations and management of a sole proprietor, it's a really simple process because the owner only has to answer to himself or herself, right? You don't have to run things by other people or other partners. So it makes the process really simple for you. Now, a sole proprietor does outsource, right? So they may have a bookkeeper or accountant, things of that nature, but they're ultimately making the decisions. Now, when it comes to the LLC, it's a little more complex because if you have more than one person that's a member of the LLC, you have to have what's called an operations agreement. That operations agreement is going to outline the member's stake in the company. It's going to outline their voting rights. It's going to outline their profit share. So, for instance, if you have a member that owns 33% have a 33% stake in the company, then they get a third vote. They get a third of the profit share, right? So it's really important that you have that outlined legally. Now, most states don't require that. But if you have multiple members, you need to make sure you have that in place because you want to be in line when it comes to the legal portion of your company. If something happens, you want everything in writing. So important to make sure you have the operational agreement in place. Another thing that's pretty interesting when it comes to taxation is that the LLC versus the sole proprietorship, the LLC can actually choose how they want to be taxed. Versus the sole proprietor, they're taxed how they're taxed. There's no options. And so with the LLC, you can choose to do a S Corp or a C Corp. The S Corp is still, you pass through the entity, you will be taxed on your personal income. But the C Corp, the corporation, you get a lot more benefits as well. It just depends on how you want to operate. But did you know if you file a C Corp, that the earnings that you make with that company, as long as they stay within the company, you don't get taxed on those, right? And so you also get less tax on the dividends that's paid out as well. So there's a lot of things and differences that you can do with that LLC versus the sole proprietorship. And remember, with the LLC, you can choose to have a single member or you can have multiple members. And that also makes a difference on how you pay taxes and what the best options for you are as well. Again, when it comes to legal protection for a sole proprietor, there's no separation from the personal owner and the business. And so they're liable for everything. So if they file for bankruptcy with the company, they're filing bankruptcy in their personal life too. All those debts are going to be combined. With the LLC, you have way more protection because they separate the entities. You're separate from the actual entity. So if the company bellies up, right, if you file bankruptcy with the company, then it doesn't necessarily impact your personal. Now, there's not 100% a guarantee of protection because sometimes people use their personal guarantee to fund their business, right? So you need to look into that too as you're going through these processes. But the limited liability company gives you way more protection than a sole proprietorship. I mean, with the sole proprietorship, there's just no protection at all. Everything's combined. So the big question is, well, TK, which option should I choose? Should I choose the LLC? Should I choose the sole proprietorship? And the thing is this, you have to do what's best for you. But when it comes to the sole proprietorship, that's the easiest entity to create because once again, you just fall into that by default. There's not really a lot of paperwork or fees involved. But make sure you do your research in your state because you do have to have permits. You do have to have licenses, whichever industry that you're operating in. Now, when it comes to the LLC, yes, it's going to give you way more protection, right? If somebody comes after you, if someone tries to sue you, you are protected because you're not combined with your entity. There is a separation. Also, you get more tax advantages. You can actually choose how to be taxed when it comes to having an LLC versus a sole proprietor. So there's different options that you can look into. Make sure that you reach out to an attorney or you reach out to a tax professional so they can give you the best advice based on what industry you're in. I'm here just to kind of give you an overview on how it looks and how it kind of feels and what you can do additional research on to help you have a successful business. Man, I hope that helped. God bless you guys. I'll see you at the top.